Pleasure to kind of get to know him over the last several years as one of our our key guest speakers. And so let's just welcome Mr. Herb Meyer to the podium and see what he has to say today.
Thank you. Boy, I won't forget that introduction. One for the record books. It is so nice to be with you again. Thank you for inviting me back. You don't realize what it means to invite me to Bellingham. It means I get to Trader Joe's. Thanks. Jill's given me a list about a mile long. Rick said you wanted me to talk about politics, what's going on in the world, and all that. If we're not careful, we'll be here till 9 o'clock tonight. So there are three things I want to touch on this afternoon, then we'll open it up for some conversation. I want to talk to you about politics. I want to talk to you a little bit about North Korea. And I want to tell you some new things that are happening in the world that may have an effect on your lives and your businesses. First, politics. When we talk about politics, we usually mean Republicans against Democrats, liberals against conservatives, and that sort of thing. There's a deeper meaning to politics that we often forget. Politics is the relationship between the individual and the state. And it's this relationship that we human beings have been trying to get right since we walked the earth. And we've tried everything. We've tried empires, kingdoms, right-wing dictatorships, left-wing dictatorships, military dictatorships, civilian dictatorships, anarchies, direct democracies, representative democracies, parliamentary democracies. Think of each of these systems as an operating system. Your cell phones have operating systems. You may have an iPhone, you may have an Android, it's an operating system. Well, every time you set up a country, it's an operating system. Now, every so often, the people who organize your iPhone, Apple, Google, whatever, they send out an upgrade. And it's supposed to make something work better. Sometimes you like the change, and sometimes you wish you can go back to the old way. If you decide you don't like the operating system on your cell phone, well, what do? Well, the answer is you trade in your iPhone for an Android, or you get rid of the Android and you buy an iPhone. Well, it's the same thing with countries. Every time a country passes a new law or a regulation, it's an effort to make it work better. Sometimes you like the changes, sometimes you don't, but that's what it is. Now, can you change a country's operating system? Yes. And do you know the precise technical word for changing a country's operating system? Revolution, right. Now we get to the United States. When the Founding Fathers put together our operating system, they created something that had never been seen before in history. We, the people, were in charge, and the government worked for us. Now, when you say it, it sounds like a politician's 4th of July speech, but you have to realize how stunning this was. The idea that ordinary people, and we're farmers, shopkeepers, parents, business owners, we run the thing, and those people work for us. That was revolutionary. It was stunning. Well, we had a lot of problems at the beginning. We had a civil war and all that. We made it work, and it became the envy of the world. I've never seen anything like this. You can think of FDR's New Deal as version 2. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society is 2.5. So we're always trying to make it work better. Sometimes you like a piece of legislation. Sometimes you think, wish we went to the old way. But no one ever wanted to change the operating system until now. Group of people came along. Now we can play games with words, whether you call them left-wingers, left-wing liberals, progressives, whatever. Let's use the word progressive simply because it captures it, but it's broader than that, okay? They came along and they said, no, we don't want to just make improvements and pass a new law. We want to change the operating system. That this idea that you are in charge, no, that's not right at all. You don't know enough to be in charge. We do. So we'll be in charge and you will work for us. And that's what they've been doing over the last several years. And there's no end to it. They'll tell us everything about how to live. They'll tell you what toilet bowl flush mechanism to install, what light bulbs to install, what your kids are going to eat for lunch at school, and on and on and on and on. It never ends. Now remember, this isn't normal politics. They're trying to change the operating system. The entire purpose of President Obama's 2 terms was to take this so far, you could never get it back. Now, they're trying to do this. It's a revolution without guns. You know the old cliche about you put a frog in a pot of cold water, you turn the light on, and the water warms up gradually, and finally the frog doesn't realize it, but he's boiled to death, and it's too late. That was the idea. To make incremental changes, one after the other, after the other, after the other, and by the time people realized what had happened, it was too late. It was over. This is why the Iran deal went down the way it did. Within minutes after the deal was signed, we sent $150 billion in cash to Iran. You're not getting it back. There's a difference between untangling a knot and unscrambling an egg. You can do one, you cannot do the other. Okay? That's why they did the Iran deal that way. You can't get the money back, you can't take the sanctions back on because the Europeans and everyone else already cut deals. And now you get to the Affordable Health Care Act. Do you know why it was 1,700 pages of complete gobbledygook? Because you could never, ever repeal it. And that's what the Republicans in Washington didn't get. The Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, scrambled the egg. And you cannot unscramble an egg. You cannot unscramble 10% of the egg. Now you can take the scrambled egg and turn it into a souffle or an omelet or something creative. You can't get it back where it was. That's why they did it that way. And that's why after 7 years, the Republicans are falling on their face. They haven't quite figured out that the whole purpose of it was to make it impossible to go back. So they were very clever about how these progressives did it. And then we get to the 2016 election. With 4 years of President Clinton, 8 years of President Clinton, it's over. The frog has boiled in the pot. You never get it back, and by the time you realize it, it's too late. That was the whole idea. That was the game plan. They were on cruise control to victory. And then along came Donald Trump. Now, whether you are a pro-Trump person, a never-Trumper, or like me, it wasn't my first choice, it wasn't my second, maybe not my third, but boy, better than the alternative. It doesn't matter. He stopped it. Okay? For all his faults, whatever it is, his election stopped. And by the way, what it tells us is the most important thing in American politics. There is still more of us than there are of them. That's why everybody went nuts after the election. Okay? From the moment he won the election, they couldn't believe it. They were on cruise control to victory. They had it. And it got snatched away from them. They understood what I just said. There are more of us than there are of them. Maybe not here in Washington State or in the city of Bethel, where I live in Friday Harbor, okay? And Friday Harbor, Bernie Sanders was the right wing guy. Okay? No, I'm not exaggerating. We're about to elect my piano tuner as the new mayor of Friday Harbor. Best piano tuner I ever had. He just thinks Lenin didn't go far enough. Okay? Which is odd because he owns the most expensive boutique hotel in Florida Harbor and has his own airplane. The hardest working commie I've ever met in my life. Anyway, they went nuts after the election because it stopped the revolution. They thought they had it won. And that's why you're seeing this extreme reaction in Washington. And what it means is this. When you look at the Russia collusion thing, and the Russian interference thing, and the special counsel, and everything going on, this isn't partisan politics. This is civil war. And that's the difference. That's what we're going through now. This is civil war without guns. So far, without guns. And that's what we need to understand. Now, we can spend all afternoon disagreeing about this policy and that and all that. But, you know, sometimes in life you have to choose sides. You cannot always remain above the battlefield because neither of the combatants meet your own high standards. Sometimes you have to choose sides, and that's where we are right now. And what you want to watch for as you watch the news and all this is not as Mueller right about the special prosecutor here, or what Jeff Sessions do, or why couldn't these clowns in Congress get a health care. Do you realize if you asked the entire Republican leadership in Congress to have organized lunch, they couldn't have done it. They would have formed a commission to study lunch. They would have hired staff. They would have held hearings. You wouldn't have had lunch at 11:30. Okay, they couldn't do it. When you look at all this stuff, what you just have to realize is this is civil war. And despite all the imperfections of our side and this, whose side are we going to be on? Now, again, nobody's got a crystal ball. My guess is that we'll win this thing.
Yes.
There are more of us than there are of them. And that's why it's getting so nasty so fast. So that's what you want to look for as you look at the news. Now, as you look at the news, what do you see but North Korea? This is a classic case of what at the CIA we used to call nuts with nukes. And it's terrifying, okay? What North Korea wants is South Korea. They want to unify Korea under their control. That's what they want. South Korea won't fight. They have a huge army, it'll be a hell of a battle. But if they fight, even if South Korea in the end wins, the city of Seoul is a pile of rubble. It's 30 miles from the border. Every piece of artillery is aimed at it. What kind of a victory is it if you just lost your city, if all your factories were bombed? They're not going to fight. The only thing stopping Kim in North Korea from unifying South Korea is the United States. We're there. We've been there since 1953. We have troops. We have artillery. We pledged to defend them. So long as we're there, he can't do it. So he needs some way to get us out of the way. And that's how you get to a nuclear program. If Kim can stand up and say, I can hit Seattle, you're going to get people in Seattle saying, hey, wait a minute, do I really care about South Korea? Senator Patty Murray is going to say, well, we're going to fight for South Korea even if it means losing Seattle. I know we have a second senator, but I can't remember who it is. Oh, yeah. Not exactly one of the... No. They don't want to fight for South Korea. Well, what do you get, Kia cars or something? They're nice, but big deal. The whole point is to get the United States to walk away from South Korea. To say, no, we're not going to defend it. And then the North puts the pressure on the South, and basically the South gives in. That's what's going on. That's the whole game. And we'll see what happens. No one's got a crystal ball here. This is very dangerous. Of course, it should never gotten this far, but it did. But with the one thing, I've been watching the news for the last 24 hours, nobody seems to get to the main point, which is North Korea wants South Korea. And the only thing stopping them is us. So if you can get us to not care about South Korea because we could lose San Francisco or Seattle, they can grab it. Now, we'll see what President Trump wants to do. I don't know. What's interesting is all over the world right now, in foreign ministries, presidential palaces, and all that, every president, every prime minister, every defense minister, every foreign minister is sitting there saying, what the hell is he going to do? No one knows, because he's never been in a position like this before. Now here I can speak with some authority. You know, he grew up in Queens, New York. I grew up in Brooklyn. I mean, if I talk normal, this is what I would sound like. I'm just trying to not do that with you guys, because you wouldn't understand a word I said. Okay? Quiet. Break your face, you make another crack like that. You see? The point is this. I married an English girl, it changed my accent. The point is this. I know a thing or two about schoolyard bullies. Okay? He's a schoolyard bully. He's always picking on somebody. Last week it was Jeff Sessions. 2 weeks from now it'll be, I don't know, Secretary of State Tillerson or, Secretary of HHS, Tim, sorry, what's the last name? Yeah. Yeah. It's always picking on somebody. When you're the richest guy in the room in New York, you always win. Okay, that's just how it works in the real estate business in New York, okay? And if you do some carpentry work on my building, you give me a bill for 20,000 bucks, I said, I'm not paying you 20,000 bucks. Sue me. I've got more money than you do. I can break you. And before long, you'll take 10,000 and be glad you got it. Okay, that's Donald Trump. That's fine, a big, huge success. For the first time in his life, he's up against real bastards. You're talking Vladimir Putin, Xi in China, the guys in North Korea, and we're going to see how tough he is. Now, maybe he's tough. I mean, maybe he can take these guys. If he does, we put him on Mount Rushmore. Okay, no, really. But this is what everyone in the world is holding their breath to see. Okay, now you're up against the real bastards. And let's see how tough you are. And the answer is we don't know the answer. He's got wonderful people around him. He's got some good generals. The Secretary of State's Rex Tillerson. You don't get to be chairman of Exxon and be an idiot. He's had more foreign and diplomatic experience than most foreign ministers in their lifetimes, and I don't think he's a pushover. So they may pull this thing off in some way. But just to let you know, everyone in the world is holding their breath, saying for the first time in his life, he's up against guys and he hasn't got more money than they do, and it doesn't matter. And now let's see how tough he is. Now again, it could turn out to be really tough, or not, we don't know. So that's where we are with that. While all of that is going on, there's something much bigger going on that never ever gets the attention it deserves. And we were talking about this the last time I was here. It's the biggest underreported news story in the world. Today, around the world, more human beings are emerging from poverty more swiftly than at any time in recorded history. By 1980 or 1990, about 2 billion human beings had emerged from poverty. Since then, it's another 500 million or so. A lot of them in China and India. In the last 6, 7 years, 20 million Brazilians emerged from poverty. Today, on the continent of Africa, the number of people with disposable income is well over 300 million. It's bigger than the US population. When you put all these numbers together, each year between 50 and 100 million human beings emerge from poverty. When we say someone's out of poverty, we don't mean they have a big house with 2 SUVs in the driveway. To be out of poverty means there's enough food to eat. You're living decently. The children have been inoculated against the basic childhood illnesses. Kids are up in the morning, they've had breakfast, they're off to school. At least one of the parents has some kind of work that gives him or her some disposable income. Not as much as you've got or I've got, but some disposable income. That's what it actually means to be out of poverty. And today, more human beings are crossing that line than at any time in history. What it means is this: within the lifetimes of some of us here today, certainly within the lifetimes of all of the high school and college students here in Bellingham, the world will cross a line that's never been crossed before, and most people never even imagined could be crossed. For the first time in history, the overwhelming majority of human beings will not be poor. That's stunning, and no young American is being told this is the world they're heading for. And if you had to find one word to explain why this is happening, it's a word that if I went over to Western Washington, stood in the middle of the campus and said it, I'd need SEAL Team 6 to get me out of there. Globalization. Now, just to be grammatically correct, there's a new word, globalism. That sort of means you believe in a one world, one government thing. Forget that. Globalization means, well, it's the process that makes every product available all over the world at the lowest possible price. Think about that. Every product in the world available all over at the lowest possible price. Most of you have cell phones. You have the best cell phone in the world. Now, I've got an iPhone, you may have an Android, a Samsung or something. The differences are trivial. They can make and receive calls. You can surf the web. You can check your email. They have apps on them. There isn't a better cell phone. Melania Trump doesn't have a better cell phone. Now, you can have a gold case on it, and you put a couple of diamonds around it, but it's the same phone. Okay? If the flush mechanism in the toilet at Trump Tower breaks, there's no special store where you get a new flush mechanism. You go to Lowe's. You go to Home Depot. There's no better light bulb you can get. I've got an iPad there. All right, you have the iPad, you have the IBM Surface. There's not a better one, and we can argue over differences. Same thing with cars. Do you know, whatever car you get, whether you get a Subaru or a Mercedes or a Land, they're great. They meet safety standards. They run for well over 100,000 miles. This has never happened in world history. Kids don't realize this. You know, you talk to kids today and you say, when I was your age, if you wanted to telephone someone, you had to know where they were. And they go, why? You know? Well, you know, when you and I were growing up, if you were richer, you could do things that you could have pride we couldn't have. And yet now, more and more, we have the same products. If you're Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, you can't get a better light bulb. You can get a fancier car, but it isn't a better car. It doesn't go faster. It doesn't meet better safety standards. This is globalization. This is the most incredible process that has ever happened in the world. That's why the world is emerging from poverty at a rate we've never seen before. And it's creating a global middle class. And that's what people keep missing. Because this global middle class is our customer base. They want every product and service we can create. And that's where prosperity comes from. And this is what everyone keeps missing. Now, There's something very big going on that is only just now starting to get attention. I'll tell you an interesting story. In 1943, somebody went to the chairman of IBM Corporation, Thomas Watson, and said, Mr. Watson, you know more about computers than anybody in the world. What's the global market for computers? And Watson said, about 5. That is now considered the worst prediction in the history of business. What he couldn't see, what is possible to see, is the invention of the semi-conductor, which completely changed the course of human history. Okay? Every so often, something like that happens, you can't see it coming, and when it comes, it changes everything. Okay? If we're going to bring the world out of poverty and create this global middle class, we're going to need fuel. People are going to live decently. You got to light up those houses and apartments. You got to heat them. You got to cool them. They're going to have appliances. Factories are being built all over the world to provide products for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 billion people coming out of poverty. Factories need power. There means trucks on the road, moving things around, people getting to and from work, cars, buses, trains, taxis, and on and on. We're going to have to extract more fuel from Earth than anyone ever thought's possible. And now there's a revolution taking place that I think is right up there with the semiconductor. It's fracking. What it means is that energy prices are coming down. And they're not going back up. Now, by the way, they can go up $2 a barrel or $3 a barrel. But for the rest of our lives, energy prices are going to be low. That's fantastic. Do you realize what that means for people coming out of poverty? That's why you're building Cherry Point. That you have all these people, they need power to power up the factories, to give them the heating and the cooling and everything else. And then they buy our products. Last month, a tanker left Louisiana, port of New Orleans, Louisiana, filled with liquid natural gas and docked in Poland. We just smashed Putin's monopoly of energy exports to Eastern Europe, which, by the way, nobody seems to have noticed. I'm assuming the Secretary of State noticed, the chairman of Exxon would notice something like that. But nobody else seems to have noticed that that was global changing. Energy prices are coming down, just like computer prices came down. Well, and now it's happening with energy. Isn't that stunning? So that's one of these technological breakthroughs that's going to change life on Earth. Nobody noticed. There's another one happening. If you're going to bring a population out of poverty, you need fuel and you need food, particularly protein. Well, there are food revolutions too, and the particular one that comes to mind is genetically engineered seeds. Today, using genetically engineered seeds, we can produce the same amount of food we produced in 1960 using 68% less land. Isn't that stunning? And boy, you won't see that on CNN or in the New York Times. And there's an interesting political shift coming, which we're not going to see here in Bellingham for a while, but let me tell you. All over the world now, in these countries that are becoming middle class. By the way, did you know that Netflix is now in 190 countries? No, but do you realize what that means? Okay, you're in some country you never heard of before, you can't find on a map. If you're watching a movie on Netflix, you got a television set or you have an iPad. That means you have power. You have the machinery. You're not sitting in a tent someplace, okay? This is powered up. Did you know Yum Brands, which owns Kentucky Fried Chicken and Pizza Hut, says the busiest franchises in the world are now in Africa. Okay? So what that means is people in these countries are phoning down ordering a pizza or chicken, sending somebody to pick it up, coming back, putting it on a kitchen table, flipping on a movie and watching Netflix. Okay, they're on our side. No, but this is crucial to 190 countries, all right? This is big stuff. Okay, so what the people in these countries are saying is, look, we need cheap energy. We need cheap protein. And you American environmentalists are getting in our way. Because you're stopping fracking, you're stopping energy exports, and you don't like genetically engineered seeds. So you're keeping me poor. And that's an enormous change taking place in the world. Because the people who are against these things, whether it's the coal export facility, or whether it's fracking, or whether it's genetically engineered seeds, they think, oh, they're wonderful, they're protecting Earth. No, you're not. You're keeping people starving to death. You're keeping them from becoming prosperous, from joining the middle class. And there's an enormous political change just beginning to take place, which is these people in these countries, who these idiots keep saying, we're saving them, saying, get out of my way. I just want to get a pizza, I want to have a roof over my head, I want to be warm or cool in here, and I want to watch a movie. Well, good, because they're just like us. And that's a middle class. And by the way, another interesting fact you will somehow not see in the New York Times or CNN. Do you know the fastest growing religion on the African continent? Christianity.